Our next speaker is Mark Kennedy. Mark is the Chief Executive Officer of Chartwell Strategic Advisors. He also brings extensive experience in international business and government to our discussion here this morning. In business, Mark has been a senior manager at Macy's and a global executive with Accenture. In government, he served 3 terms in the United States Congress, House of Representatives, and was a presidential appointee in both the Bush and Obama administrations. In his teaching, speaking, and advising, Mark focuses on integrating non-market considerations in business strategy. Mark.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here with such an august body, and I appreciate the invitation. I'm going to focus my remarks today on just one specific aspect of the Global Compact, and that is dealing with corruption. And I believe that that is a big contributor to helping to deal with the poverty, because corruption is a big part of what drives that. And I've been paying attention to what everybody's been saying. Bishop Dowling mentioned when he started talking about business and what we expect from them, transparency and accountability. Father Peter John talked about the need for good governance. Ambassador Parham talked about the need to have business climate that could help realize economic potential. Hal Culbertson talked about how civil wars are largely financed by corruption and how we need just institutions. So I think that this is a key part of what we really need to focus on to make the Global Compact effective. And I would share with you that for you visual learners, I'm going to be using pictures to help explain what I'm saying that I've taken in my travels around the world, to help shed light on how it is that we can write the future, really write a better future for all of us by cleaning up this corruption that is plaguing too much of our world. And it is an important issue because corruption is very much a lose-lose proposition. It's lose for those in poverty because it feeds off of poverty, at the same time it perpetuates them, but it also helps divert away economic development from parts of the world that could benefit from it. Because businesses look at a very corrupt environment and they tend to say, I'm going to stay away from that. If you look at just one example of how corruption really deprives the people in less developed countries from the kind of services they should get, if you land at the New Delhi airport and you take the airport road, it's a private road. As you can see, it's a very nice road, no potholes, you go along very quickly. You're on your way to Gurgaon, all the office towers there, and you go to Gurgaon office towers, and it looks as if the office towers are connected by dirt roads. Except when I talked to one of the workers in those office towers, they said, well, actually, the government pays to have these roads paved about every 18 months. But there's this cycle of shoddy work and corrupt contracts that just perpetuates itself so that you're left in this woeful state. And roads may not be the most important services that we need to develop, but it's an example of how corruption degrades the amount of services that are available to those in less developed country. We really need to have, it's hard to see the word equitable here, but unless government is acting in an equitable manner to treat everyone, it's going to undermine its own credibility, and it's going to really make it harder for businesses to come in there and provide the kind of economic development that can help those in need. Business needs to have a standard of contact so that if somebody in Tokyo is dealing with somebody in South Bend, that they know what standard that other party is going to play and that they're going to live up to their part of the deal. If they engage in behind-the-back activity, they're going to start down a slippery slope. That very first payment that they make in a corrupt payment is going to put a big I pay sign on the company so that everybody is going to be coming looking for their payment, and they're going to slide further and further down this path of corruption till they ultimately get caught in the act. And when you get caught in the act, it can be very expensive for businesses. If you just take the example of one, Siemens last year paid $1.6 billion in fines. That's 1.6 with a B for engaging in corrupt activities that just a few short years earlier were deductible according to German taxes. So this is one of the reasons why, from a business perspective, businesses need to figure out a way to stay away from corruption. And nothing kills businesses or careers like bad ethics. When I first graduated from undergraduate college, I was very pleased to get a job with what at the time was the most respected accounting firm in the world, Arthur Andersen. Several decades after I left Arthur Andersen, they had one client team and one client that ultimately we don't have a Arthur Andersen as we knew it anymore. So some real strong, valid reasons why, not just to help with the development of countries around the world, but also to protect themselves, why companies need to steer clear from this corruption and why it's good that they're embracing something like the Global Compact. Another reason is that as they look to tap growth in those high growth markets, they have to have what I call de-icing, because much of the growth is in countries like China or India, where if you look at Transparency International's Corruption Perception Index, you'll find that they're dealing in countries that have half the score of those that they're more used to dealing in. So they're also going to be tapping that growth, hiring employees that are used to taking more risk than they might. This is a picture I took in New Delhi. This guy's 40 foot up in the air, welding, with no harness just in case he falls and no mask over his face. And you can rest assured that if that's your employee, and if they're doing something like parking on the sidewalk, that like Siemens, you're going to end up getting stuck with the tab for that ticket. So the real goal is, how do you prevent that? Recently, I was talking about combating corruption to a group of EMBAs, executive MBAs in Doha, and I said that as I landed in Doha, I didn't get quite a clear view out my window of my plane, because the plane, like everything in that region, is covered in dust. I told them that when your porch looks like this for half the year in Minnesota, dust is not our problem. Our problem is, when we're taking off, is a de-icing process. And the de-icing is to have a coating on the plane, because if ice builds up on that wing, it could ultimately cause the plane to crash. And I thought there was a good metaphor, because corruption, as it said, is like that ball of snow that once it starts going, it just keeps going. So companies need to have a de-icing type program to prevent this corruption that undermines not just their own development, but the countries they're in. A similar coating of procedures and policies that help prevent that corruption from occurring. It's good to have a broom. It's even better to use it. And as we look at what they need to do, they need to make sure that there's clearly defined standards in their organizations, that it's not cloudy like it is in this picture, that when they set their name to standards that they want everybody to follow, that they're following the same standards, because companies and how they act will be a reflection of how the top management acts. So it's important that top management walks the talk, and that they're not just metering out a pile of BS, because if they are, that's exactly what you will see from the employees. It's also important that they have a training program, because a lot of these ethical challenges are complex, and helping people understand specific in their industry situation what types of challenges they might face and how they can work through them is important, so that when you're having a monitoring program, which is important, that it isn't just the auditors and the people from above that are doing it, but it's the employees themselves that are helping to watch each other to make sure that they are staying on the right path and making the right decisions. And finally, there has to be accountability in their programs. If employees at whatever level are caught doing something they shouldn't be, unless there's accountability, the program will not have value. The other thing I would like to mention is that I really have found that organizations, companies need to also embrace a purpose. Good actions give strength to ourselves and inspire good actions in others. That's something that we've known ever since the time of Plato. And although we're here in Irish and we all like Oscar Wilde, I think Oscar Wilde understood that, but was just being cynical by what he observed of others, that, you know, looking good and dressing is a necessity, but having a purpose is not. Having a purpose is a necessity, because if a corporation's only goal is to make money, they will ultimately find that things go tilt when an employee actually engages in corruption because they made money doing so. That's why you need to have a head for more than just figures. You need that, but you need to have good corporate governance. You need to have a commitment to helping out those in need, as we've talked about with the corporate social responsibility. But I would also suggest you need to have more. It's best for an organization to define a purpose for itself and its own activities where it leaves the world in a better place. In this case with Ethan, that he leaves the world with more power and more energy. I know sometimes it's hard to kind of define what is the positive purpose of some organizations. I'm sure more of the students could help us with this one as to how they're making the world a better place. And it's too easy sometimes to go to the cliches that your business really has nothing really to do with. But not everybody is Bono, or he has to try to be Bono. But if you're even doing something like making skiing more affordable or providing the backbone for America, but you're better off if that goal that you've set out, that purpose for your business, is something that concretely leaves the world in a better place. As with GE here, less fuel, fewer emissions. Or an interesting example is with Starbucks that partnered with Conservation International to help farmers learn how to grow coffee in a way that they could do it in the shade and therefore could protect the rainforest. There are many benefits that a business gets by engaging in this type of purpose. Number one, it really provides an anchor for their ethics program, to make that ethics program more effective, so that when they're dealing with these twisted, complicated ethical issues, that they're more likely to say no to compromise. Number two, it increases the alignment with an organization in that the driver and the horse aren't going in different directions and that everybody's singing from the same songbook. It increases the engagement of the employees. They're more likely to want to follow and take their job seriously, take that hill, reach a higher standard without having to have a harness to pull them along. And it also makes sure that your stockholders are more engaged. If they understand what your purpose is and what you are seeking to accomplish, they're more likely to be engaged with you. Governments, if they see you doing good and trying to pursue a purpose that's going to lead the world in a better place, are more likely to give you the benefit of the doubt if you ever have an issue before them. And if you're looking for allies to support your brands, your intellectual property when you're abroad, you're more likely to get them if you're pursuing a positive purpose, so that when you're in Australia, you don't have to operate as Hungry Jack. And finally, this all rolls back to what the goals of the Millennium Development Goals are of reducing poverty. Because if there's less corruption, as all of our previous speakers spoke to, there will be more economic opportunity and less of the challenges that society is plagued with. Now, I know we have some serious headwinds that we are facing, but I'm confident that if we all jump in and embrace this purpose in combating corruption, and if we act in a way where we would want to have our actions reflected in others, that we can leave a better life for our children. Thank you.